There is a specific kind of professional misery that nobody talks about. Not burnout from overwork, not frustration from a bad boss. Something quieter than that. It is the feeling of sitting in a meeting that could have been an email, of spending 8 hours being interrupted every 20 minutes, of ending a workday exhausted not from the work itself, but from being around people while trying to do the work. You came home and felt like you had run a marathon, but your legs were fine. It was your mind that was wrecked. And the confusing part is that you are not lazy. You are not antisocial. You are not someone who hates people. You just do your best work alone. Completely, noticeably, undeniably alone. And somewhere along the way, you started to wonder if something was wrong with you, because the world keeps telling you that collaboration is the highest form of professional achievement, that open offices increase creativity, that brainstorming sessions unlock innovation, that the team player is the ideal worker. But your experience keeps telling you something different, that your best ideas come when no one else is in the room, that your deepest focus happens before anyone else arrives, that you think more clearly, work more efficiently, and produce better results in solitude than you ever do in a group. Here is what psychology actually says about that. You are not broken. You may be biologically wired for something the modern workplace was not designed to accommodate. Research on introversion and nervous system arousal goes back to the work of psychologist Hans Eysenck in the 1960s. His theory, supported by decades of subsequent research, proposed that introverts and extroverts have fundamentally different baseline levels of cortical arousal. The introvert's nervous system is already running closer to its optimal stimulation level, which means that adding external stimulation, noise, social interaction, open environments does not energize it, it overloads it. The extrovert's nervous system runs below its optimal threshold at rest, which is why external stimulation feels activating rather than draining. They seek it because they neurologically need it to function at their best. This is not a personality preference, it is physiology. And when you put someone with a high baseline arousal nervous system into a collaborative, open, constantly interrupted work environment, you are not just making them mildly uncomfortable. You are systematically degrading the conditions under which their brain operates best. Here is where it gets more specific. A 2004 study by researchers at the University of Michigan found something that became one of the most replicated findings in cognitive psychology. Every time your attention shifts from one task to another, there is a measurable cognitive cost. They called it the attention residue effect. Part of your working memory stays attached to the previous task, even after you have moved on. The shift is never clean. The brain does not switch like a light, it carries threads. For people wired to work alone, this cost is not just inconvenient, it is catastrophic to their output quality, because the kind of work they do best, the work their nervous system is designed for, requires sustained, uninterrupted attention. Not 1 hour of focus. Not 30 minutes between meetings. Deep, unbroken stretches where the mind can fully enter a problem and stay there. When that gets interrupted, they do not just lose time. They lose the cognitive state that made the work possible in the first place. And rebuilding it takes longer than most people realize. Research by Gloria Mark at the University of California, Irvine found that after an interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes to return to the original task at the same level of depth. 23 minutes. For someone who gets interrupted 6 or 7 times in a morning, they may never reach genuine depth at all. They spend the entire day recovering from interruptions rather than doing the work they are capable of. There is also a less discussed biological dimension to this. Studies on sensory processing sensitivity a trait identified by psychologist Elaine Aron, show that approximately 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes environmental input more deeply than average. They notice more. They register subtle cues that others filter out automatically. They are more affected by noise, light, crowd density, and interpersonal tension. This is not anxiety. It is not weakness. It is a nervous system that is more finely tuned to its environment. In certain contexts, like creative work, complex problem solving, and tasks requiring nuance and detail, that sensitivity is a genuine cognitive advantage. The highly sensitive person notices things others miss, makes connections others do not see, catches errors others walk past. But in a loud, crowded, constantly stimulating work environment, that same sensitivity becomes a liability. Because the nervous system is processing everything. The conversation across the room, the flickering light, the emotional tone of the person sitting nearby. It cannot filter the irrelevant the way a less sensitive nervous system can. And the cognitive load of processing all of it leaves less capacity for the actual work. Solitude does not just help people like this, it restores them. Now here is the part that rarely gets acknowledged. The assumption underneath most workplace design is that collaboration produces better outcomes than solitude, that two minds are better than one, that open communication accelerates innovation. And that assumption is not always wrong, but it is not always right either. Psychologist Keith Sawyer spent years studying creativity and group work. His research found that brainstorming sessions, one of the most common collaborative formats, consistently underperform individual ideation. Groups generate fewer ideas than the same number of people working alone. And the ideas generated in groups tend toward the already familiar, because social pressure subtly suppresses genuinely novel thinking. People do not want to say the weird idea in front of others. They edit towards the acceptable. They converge toward consensus rather than exploring the full possibility space. The lone wolf, working alone, has no social audience to edit for. The weird idea gets followed. The unconventional path gets explored. The unexpected connection gets made. And often, that is exactly where the breakthrough is. What makes this specific wiring invisible is that it looks, from the outside, like a character flaw. The person who prefers to work alone is labelled as not a team player. The one who does not speak up in meetings is seen as disengaged. The one who closes their door or works from home or disappears into focus for hours is perceived as unsociable. But what is actually happening is different. They are protecting the conditions under which they do their best work. They are managing their cognitive environment the way a surgeon manages the operating room. Not because they are difficult, because they understand what their brain needs to function at the level they are capable of. The irony is that many of the most significant individual contributions to their fields came from people who work this way. Charles Darwin spent years developing his theory in relative isolation at Down House. Nikola Tesla worked primarily alone and described his best ideas as coming in moments of complete solitude. J.K. Rowling wrote the first Harry Potter book in cafes, yes, but alone, separated from her regular environment, with no one requiring her attention. This is not coincidence. It is the same nervous system wiring showing up across different people and different centuries. Here is the question worth sitting with. If you have spent your career fighting your own wiring, forcing yourself into environments that drain you, performing collaboration you do not need, apologizing for a preference that is biologically grounded, what would your work look like if you stopped? Not if you became antisocial, not if you refused to communicate or collaborate entirely, But if you designed your work life around the conditions that actually produce your best output, long stretches of uninterrupted focus, minimal environment stimulation, communication that happens on your terms and your schedule, collaboration that is intentional rather than constant. Some people are starting to figure this out. The rise of remote work has quietly been a revolution for nervous systems wired this way. For the first time, a significant portion of the workforce has been allowed to work in conditions that match their biology rather than conforming to conditions designed for a different nervous system type. And the productivity data is interesting. A Stanford study of 16,000 employees found that remote workers were 13% more productive than their in-office counterparts. That number is an average. For people with high sensory processing sensitivity and high baseline arousal, the effect is almost certainly larger, because they are not just removing commute time, they are removing the constant low-grade cognitive drain of an environment their nervous system was never designed to handle comfortably. So if this is you, if you do your clearest thinking before anyone else is awake, if you produce your best work in silence rather than in meetings, if collaboration energizes some people around you while slowly depleting you, if you have spent years wondering why something that comes easily to others feels so costly to you, the answer is not that you are doing it wrong. The answer is that you are wired differently, not deficiently, differently. Your nervous system is optimized for depth rather than breadth, for sustained focus rather than constant switching, for internal processing rather than external performance. That is not a liability. In a world increasingly built on complex problems that require sustained original thinking, that is one of the most valuable cognitive profiles a person can have. The lone wolf does not fail at collaboration. The lone wolf succeeds at something that collaboration cannot replicate. The kind of thinking that happens only when there is no one else in the room, no one to perform for, no one to edit for, just the mind, the work, and enough quiet to hear what is actually there. That is not antisocial. That is how certain people are built to do their best work. And recognizing that is not an excuse. It is an explanation worth taking seriously. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Drop it in the comments if it resonates. When do you do your best work? And how much of your career have you spent trying to do it in conditions that were never designed for you? If this video made something click, there is more where it came from. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one.